Director, get out. That was the first thing I heard when I pushed open the wobbling glass door. The rain hammered down like countless steel needles, smashing against the tin roofs of the Seong-Sudong slums, the noise deafening. I folded my priceless custom-made black umbrella and stepped onto a floor, cracked and stained with engine oil, my leather shoes sinking into the grime. Even rats would turn up their noses at a place like this, but I had no choice. There were 165 hours left until the centennial celebration.
Fix a watch.
I set the obsidian box on the counter, its surface scarred with deep scratches.
Name your price.
The figure behind the counter didn't move. A dim tungsten bulb swayed overhead. The air smelled of rust, mixed with a faint trace of cedar. My heart clenched. It was the same perfume, the one I had personally poured down the drain 5 years ago. When did President Min of the Kronos Group learn how to beg? The figure turned around. My breath caught. Her face was still paper pale, but a vicious burn scar now crawled across her left cheek toward her ear, like a centipede. Anna, the woman I had thrown away 5 years ago like trash for the sake of a family marriage. It's you. My voice was dry, disappointed. She set down the screwdriver, a mocking curve to her lips. That I didn't die that rainy night, and now I'm making things inconvenient for you at such a critical moment. I avoided her gaze and opened the box. This silent traveler, you're the only one who can fix it. I won't. Her answer was immediate. I took a deep breath, pulled out my checkbook, and wrote a long string of zeros. 50 million. Enough to buy this entire street. I pushed the check toward her. Gianna didn't even glance at it. She picked up the thin piece of paper and casually fed it into the shredder beside her. Bzz, 50 million turned into scraps. Min-Jae, she said coldly, your money dirties my shop. Anger surged straight to my head. Gianna, don't be ungrateful. Do you have any idea what kind of situation I'm in right now? Yeah, I do. She pulled a newspaper from under the counter. Splash across it was a humiliating photo of me. Director Bay is kicking you out. You're a man with nowhere to go. She walked out from behind the counter and stopped in front of me. Her hands were wrapped in thick bandages, carrying the sharp smell of medicine. You want me to fix a watch? She stared straight into my eyes.
Fine. The conditions, I said through clenched teeth. Near.
Thunder exploded outside the window. I stared at her in disbelief. I was the king of Seoul's tech empire, a man standing at the very top. Impossible. Then get out. Take your scrap metal with you. She turned to leave. Time was running out. 164 hours, 55 minutes. Director Bay's smug, bloated face flashed through my mind. My knees felt like they were filled with lead. Thud. I knelt on the oil-stained concrete floor. My suit pants were instantly soaked, the cold seeping straight into my bones. Gianna stopped. She turned back and looked at me. There was no triumph in her eyes, only a bottomless, frozen darkness. Take it off. What? A suit worth millions. It's an eyesore. she tossed over a coarse cloth apron, soaked in black grease. "Put this on." My hands shook as I undid the buttons and changed into the moldy-smelling apron. At this moment, I was no longer CO Min Jae-hoon. I was the lowest apprentice in this broken-down watch shop. And this,
There was now a black metal collar in her hand.
what is that? I stepped back instinctively. An electronic hair rate monitor. Her expression didn't change as she fastened it around my neck. This watch is delicate. The repairer's heart rate must stay perfectly steady. If you lose control, it releases a current. Beep. The collar locked. A deep humiliation rose up. The feeling of being treated like livestock. Anna picked up the lifeless pocket watch and pressed it to her ear, listening. "Do you know why this watch won't run?" she asked softly. Why? She looked up, her gaze like a rusted blade. Because inside it is my father's wronged soul. Cold spread through my entire body. Before I could react, the icy tip of a watchmaker's knife was already pressed to my throat. "Min Jae-hoon," she said. "Welcome to hell." The knife tip broke the skin. A thin line of blood slid down my neck. I didn't dare move. The red light on the collar around my neck was flashing like mad. Bzzz! A surge of electricity ripped through my body. I let out a muffled groan and nearly collapsed. Heart rate. Don't Truti. Gianna withdrew the blade and read the number coldly. Looks like President Men really is afraid of dying. "What do you actually want?" I panted. "To save this watch." She pointed at the obsidian box. "The silent traveler uses a balance spring made of living metal. It's been dormant for too long. To wake it, it needs to be slowly warmed at a constant 37 degrees. She grabbed my hand and slammed it down onto the icy movement. "Grip it. From now on, except for bathroom breaks, your hand cannot leave it by even half an inch. I don't care if you blister or your hand cramps. You do not let go. You're insane. I am." She pulled over a chair and sat across from me. "And you are my fuel." The first night was endless torture. The movement was like a heat-draining black hole, constantly sucking warmth from my palm. My hand grew stiff, then began to spasm. Any time I loosened my grip even a little, Gianna would mercilessly splash a cup of ice water on me. "Maintain the temperature," she shouted. At 3 in the morning, sleep crashed over me like a tide. My head drooped without me realizing it. Bzzz! The electric shock snapped me awake again. Gianna sat in the darkness, her eyes bloodshot, staring at me like a vulture guarding a corpse. "Why?" My voice was hoarse. "5 years ago, it was your father you set up." She shot to her feet and slammed the wrench in her hand against the wall. "You don't deserve to mention him. If it weren't for rushing orders for your damn conglomerate, how would he have worked himself to death at the bench?" I fell silent. So that was why she hated me. Suddenly, the wind chime at the shop entrance rang.
A man in a raincoat burst inside. "We're closed," Gianna said without turning around.
The man didn't answer. A flash of cold light shot straight toward the movement on the counter.
"One of Director Pay's people. Watch out."
Ignoring the spasms in my hand, I lunged toward Gianna. Thud! The dagger sank into my left shoulder. Pain exploded, my vision going dark, but I held the movement tight against my chest and didn't let it fall. The assassin missed his kill and fled back into the rainy night. The flood soaked through that filthy apron. Jana froze. She stared at the knife handle on my shoulder. For the first time, her hands shook. Why? The watch can't break. I grimaced through the pain. If it does, I lose. Idiot. She cursed under her breath and rushed for the first aid kit. As she cut open my shirt, a metal ring slipped out of my pocket. It was the engagement ring I never managed to give her 5 years ago. Jana's movements stopped. Why do you still have this? Forgot to throw it away, I lied. She didn't expose me. She just bandaged me a little more gently. Bear with it. She used tweezers to lift a movement and placed it under a magnifier. Wait! Her voice changed. What is it? She asked weakly. There's something inside the movement. She carefully dismantled the lowest plate. Hidden there was a microfilm no bigger than a fingernail. Held up to the light, it was covered in dense writing. It's my dad's handwriting. Gianna's voice trembled. This is Chairman Min's final message. I forced myself upright. My father. At that moment, every light in the shop went out. Darkness swallowed everything. Power outage, no. The line was cut. Gianna quickly locked the door. Director Pei has started moving. Cold seeped in from all sides. With no heat, the temperature of the movement began to drop fast. No. At this rate, the balance spring will snap, Gianna cried. Come here. I reached out in the dark. For what? Finally, we huddled together. It's the only way. She hesitated for 2 seconds, then slipped into my arms. We curled up in the corner behind the counter, coats wrapped tight around us. Her body was freezing like a block of ice. With my uninjured hand, I held the movement firmly, pressing it between our chests. 2 hearts beat through thin layers of cloth. Our breaths tangled together. For that moment, there was no hatred, no scheming. Only 2 people clinging to each other in a storm, like castaways. Min Jae-hyun. She suddenly whispered my name. Yeah, if the watch is fixed, will you let Director Pei go? I'll make his life worse than death. Good. And a munching like the grunge collect on the people. Just as the atmosphere turned charged, the collar around my neck let out a shrill beep. And I want my potty like. Yusik snick maybe. Yeah, if the watch is fixed, will you let Director Pei go? I'll make his life worse than death. Good. Just as the atmosphere turned charged, the collar around my neck let out a shrill beep. Not the warning tick, but a continuous, high-pitched whine. Ah, I clutched my neck in agony as electricity drilled into my nerves like a venomous snake. What's happening? Gianna panicked and grabbed the collar. Baby Anna, panic cut. I bit my lip until it bled. Director Pei's sinister voice came through the collar.
My dear nephew, having a pleasant night. Since you enjoy playing watchmaker, I thought I'd add a little extra. The current surged.
I convulsed and collapsed to the floor, like a fish thrown onto land. Gianna went mad, trying to pry the collar open. It's useless, Director Pei said with a laugh. It's locked remotely. Unless it does. The Korean kept going for a full 10 minutes before it finally stopped. I collapsed on the floor like a heap of mud, my mouth filled with a metallic taste. Jana knelt beside me, clutching a pair of pliers, her face streaked with tears. I'll kill him. She grabbed the watchmaker's knife from the table and rushed for the door.
Stop. I reached out and caught her ankle. Don't. Go throw your life away.
So I'm just supposed to stand here and watch you get electrocuted to death, she screamed, on the edge of breaking.
There are still 120 hours.
I forced myself upright. Bring me the watch. The next 2 days were pure hell. Director Bay had bribed the power company. This entire block was completely cut off. We could only rely on candles for light. That bought apprentice took advantage of a moment when we weren't looking and poured something into the lubricating oil.
When I lowered the movement into the oil bath, a choking white smoke rose up. A strong acid.
Lights out, hide the white soul connotation. Diana screamed. That gear assembly was the only thing her father had left behind. In the core of the movement itself, once it was corroded, no one could save it. Don't touch it. I can neutralize it. She turned to look for something. There wasn't time. Staring at the smoking oil bath, my mind went blank. There was only one thought left. I couldn't lose. Without hesitation, I plunged my right hand into the searing acid. A sharp hiss filled the air. The pain crashed over me all at once, but I didn't pull back. I groped through the burning liquid until my fingers touched cold metal. I had it. I yanked my hand out and flung the gear assembly onto a clean cloth. Min Jae, Yana rushed over. When she saw my right hand, raw, mangled, the bones of my fingers faintly visible, her whole body started shaking. You're insane. That hand still has to sign papers, still has to hold a pen. The watch is still here. Cold sweat poured down my face, but I forced a smile. As long as it's here, it's fine. She cradled my hand with trembling fingers, tears falling straight onto the wound.
Is it worth it? For some broken company?
To win. She said nothing. She quickly took out the first aid kit and began cleaning the injury. When the alcohol went on, I nearly blacked out from the pain. But watching her focused profile, the tears clinging to her lashes, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction. In the ruined shop, by the weak glow of candlelight, she bent her head to bandage my hand, her breath brushing my wrist. On impulse, I lifted her chin with my uninjured left hand and kissed her. Her lips were cold, tasting faintly of salt and tears. She didn't resist. We clung to each other in despair, like two wounded animals trying to survive, until I felt her hand press against my chest. She pushed me away. That's enough. Gianna stepped back 2 paces, the warmth vanishing from her eyes. Don't misunderstand, Min Jae-hyun. She wiped her lips, her voice sharp with cold. This was just a way to stabilize your heart rate. If it gets too fast, it affects my calibration. I froze, like I'd been doused with water. A tool. Yes, a tool. She turned her back to me. Don't forget, I'm a businesswoman. Once the watch is fixed, I'm taking half the shares of the Kronos Group. I gave a bitter laugh. Of course. That was reality.
Just then the salvaged gear assembly began to emit a faint blue glow, a holographic image
projected itself onto the wall. It was surveillance footage. On screen, Director Bay was holding a pillow, pressing it hard over my father's face. The truth was laid bare. Gianna and I both stood there, stunned. So it was him! I clenched my fist until my nails dug into my palm. Before we could process it, Gianna's phone rang. A video call. On the screen, Director Bay sat on a leather sofa, his foot planted on an elderly woman tied up on the floor. "Grandma!" Gianna screamed. The only family she had left in this world. "Miss Gianna, I hear you're quite good with watches." Director Bay toyed with a knife. "I'll give you two choices. Either you destroy that watch, or I destroy this old woman. Don't touch her." Gianna leant toward the screen. "Tonight, at midnight, bring the remains of the watch to the dockside warehouse." The call ended. Silence fell like death. Gianna collapsed onto the floor, her eyes empty. On one side was a blood-soaked family vendetta and her only chance to turn the tables. On the other was the life of her closest loved one. "Destroy the watch," I said softly, closing my eyes. "What?" She looked up at me.
I said destroy it. Go save your grandma.
I stood up and straightened the filthy apron around my waist.
I'll settle things with Director Bay myself.
"You'll die." "Then so be it." I smiled faintly. These 7 days were enough for me anyway. I turned and walked toward the door. "Min Jae-hun," she called out behind me. I didn't look back. I just didn't expect that to be the last time I saw her looking at me that way. The final glance before trust completely collapsed. The dockside warehouse reeked of salt and fish. Director Pei stood on top of a container with 20 hired thugs, looking down at us. Gianna's grandmother was suspended in midair, swaying on a rope. I stood alone below, holding the black obsidian box. "Where's the item?" Director Pei blew out a ring of smoke. "Right here." I opened the box. Inside were scattered parts and smashed gears. "Excellent!" Director Pei laughed loudly. "Min Jae-hyun, so you've fallen this far."
Release her!
"Release her," he sneered.
I don't remember promising that.
He flicked his hand. The rope snapped. The old woman screamed as she fell toward the sea. "No! Oh, star!" The figure rushed out of the shadows. "The what? A wooden figure in a pohanseyat?" "No, a Boeing." "Min Jae-hyun, da kom tat." "No, a snap. What related a box?" "No!" A figure rushed out of the shadows. It was Gianna. Her rope was sucking out. No, a shagger. And the factor rushed out of the fac. You have a sound.
Woo by holding. I sat the narzegen touch. Woo as I seek. I mean Jane may mess. Woo silver. A black nurse.
What? Gianna bidi haien backs. Home relay. Haien that. Volleying that. Director Pei's face changed. I let out a cold laugh.
You didn't think I'd come unprepared.
Before setting out, I had already contacted my father's loyal former men. They were hidden underwater.
Kill him, Director Pei roared in fury. All 20 thugs charged at once. I shielded Gianna and backed away. "The watch! Did you really destroy it?" she shouted amid the chaos. "It's fake!" I pulled out the intact pocket watch and shoved it into her hand. "Take your grandmother and go. As long as the watch exists, I can still win. And you go Now I pushed her away and turned to face the incoming blows. One man couldn't stand against so many. Before long, I was knocked to the ground.
The sound of cracking ribs was unmistakable. Director Pei stepped on my face, grinding his shoe into my wounds.
"Where's the watch?" I spat out blood and grinned through the pain. "Take a guess. Search him."
They searched me thoroughly and found nothing.
"Boss, the woman got away."
That someone shouted. Director Pei's face turned livid. Chase her! She must have the watch! Just then, the warehouse doors burst open. A forklift came crashing inside. Sitting in the driver's seat was Gianna. She hadn't left. Let him go, she shouted. Director Pei laughed. How touching. Since you came back, you can die together. He pulled out a dark handgun and aimed it at my head. Gianna, hand over the watch, or I pull the trigger. Gianna jumped down, clutching the pocket watch tightly. Her eyes were trembling. Give it to him, I rasped. Don't worry about me. She walked toward Director Pei step by step. Here. She held it out. Director Pei reached for it greedily. The moment his fingers touched it, thud. Gianna suddenly dropped to her knees. Please, Director Pei, she cried. I'll be a witness. I'll testify that Min Jae-hun forged the will. Just let my grandmother go. I froze. My mind went blank. What did you say?
Director Pei burst into laughter. A wise choice. Fine. Smash the watch and I'll take you in as my goddaughter. Jana stood up and raised the pocket watch high, right in front of me.
It was the hope we'd paid for with 3 sleepless nights, with blood and body heat.
Crack! She slammed it onto the concrete. Parts scattered everywhere. It felt like my heart shattered with it. Gianna.
I stared at her in despair. She didn't look at me. Instead, she picked up the most critical piece, the escapement wheel, and handed it to Director Pei.
This is the core. Without it, the watch is useless. Director Pei took the gear in triumph. Ah, Min Jae-hun, you lost. How does it feel to be betrayed by the woman you love?
He lifted the gear to admire it. In that single second, Jana's eyes changed.
Somehow she was holding an extremely thin watchmaker's needle. With a sharp motion, she drove it straight through his hand, pinning the gear in place.
Ah! A scene aversion. Mobin the stopper.
Director Pei screamed and dropped the gun. Jenna kicked it away, locked an arm around his throat, and pressed another needle against the vital point on his neck. Don't move! She shouted. Everyone froze. Close the Hong Tenendorfen, with the Rouge de Pei, being a rule de Pelgang. Gianna kicked it away. The Alpanona tavered in the sorna and pressed another needle against the vital point on his neck. Don't move, she shouted. Everyone froze. The reversal came too fast for anyone to react. Let us go, Jenna said, dragging Director Pei backward. We retreated to the edge of the dock. At last, police sirens wailed closer and closer. I restored the Pei. I breasted Pei again. The Zaporofak was round fun. Director Pei was taken away, and we collapsed under the ground. I stared at the scattered wreckage of parts, hollow inside. The watch is ruined, I murmured. I still lost, even with Director Pei arrested without a restored watch. I still couldn't inherit the group. Jenna looked at me and suddenly smiled. It was a fragile, resolute smile. Ming-Jae-hun, did you really think that gear was real? What?
That escapement wheel was fake. The real core was never inside the watch. She slowly pulled aside her rain-soaked collar. Between her collarbones hung a silver necklace. The pendant was a delicate gear, gleaming with a pale, bone-like sheen. It rested against her chest, trembling faintly with her heartbeat. It was made from my father's remains, she said quietly. She looked at me, a wild intensity in her eyes. To keep it from being taken, I hid it within my own body 5 years ago, close to my main artery. She tapped her chest. If you want to fix that watch, if you want your group back, then you'll have to take a blade and cut it out yourself. Go on, President. She placed the blood-stained watchmaker's knife into my hand.
Take it.
The knife handle was slick in my hand, soaked with cold sweat and blood. Gianna stood in the sea wind, her collar open. Beneath her pale skin, the implanted gear bulged up, like a grotesque tumor, or like a medal. With every heartbeat, it trembled. Go on, she said, stepping closer. The tip of the blade touched her skin. Just cut here. Sever that vessel and you'll get it. You're the king of a tech empire. Basic anatomy shouldn't be a problem, right? I stared at her. My hand was shaking violently. All it would take was one cut. The Kronos Group would be mine. The trillion-level assets would be mine. My revenge would be complete. But she would die. A major artery ruptured 3 minutes, and it would all be over. You think I don't have the guts? I gritted out, my eyes burning red. Of course you do. 5 years ago you abandoned me for a political marriage. Today you'd kill me for power. That fits your image perfectly, doesn't it? She smiled bitterly and closed her eyes. Come on, make it quick. Time seemed to freeze. The waves crashed against the rocks like a funeral bell. Clang! The watchmaker's knife fell to the ground with a clear, sharp sound. Gianna's eyes flew open. I dropped to my knees, covered my face with both hands, and let out a strangled cry. I lost! Well, I don't want it anymore. I looked up. Tears mixed with blood ran down my face. The group, the shares, the revenge, to hell with all of it. I just want you alive. I pulled the crumpled copy of the will from my pocket, tore it to pieces, and scattered it into the sea. I withdraw. Gianna froze. She clearly hadn't expected Min Jae-hyun, the arrogant, untouchable Min Jae-hyun, to choose her over power. You're insane, yeah. I am. I gave a crooked smile. From the day I met you, I stopped being normal. I stood up and turned to leave. This time, I truly had nothing left. Stop! Her voice came from behind me. Who said you could go? Dai turned around. What? Yana took a scalpel from the emergency kit. Without hesitation, she cut into her own chest. No. I rushed toward her. Blood poured out. Her face went deathly pale, but she forced herself not to cry out. With trembling fingers, she dug out the gear, slick with blood. Take it. She pressed the warm, crimson-stained gear into my hand, then collapsed limply. Hide her. Why, I pressed down on her wound and shouted like a madman. Call an ambulance now. She smiled weakly. Her bloodied hand reached up and touched my face. The big monster's goading her. A smutty questor to shake ten the bleaker. Da you Pasha's a blooder and stained scalpel, and Shanglash Pasha's to give in that. The tiny what I did I should add to. the spot where what drew was the teeter battalion tick. The centennial gala.
Aulus Frovers, high boat, high tivers, Brittian late thoughters.
Pockets done, poor and fouty. Whatever.
The Cahan.
The blue-eye, the time fetcher. The Tashin, the passion. At that moment, the banquet hall doors were shoved open. I walked in, pushing a wheelchair. Gianna sat in it, her face pale. Thick bandages were wrapped around her chest, and she held the black obsidian box in her arms. The entire hall fell silent. We were both stained with blood, completely out of place in all this luxury. Who said I didn't come? I stopped at the stage and set the box on the podium. Click. The box opened. The once lifeless, silent traveler now ticked with powerful, crisp precision. The second hand jumped accurately, each beat like a slap across Pei Junho's face. This is impossible! Pei Junho stumbled back in panic. It's fake! The pocket watch suddenly projected a beam of light onto the big screen. It displayed ironclad evidence of Director Pei's murder, along with years of embezzlement and money laundering by the Pei family. The room erupted. Police rushed in and pinned Pei Junho to the ground.
Min Junhun, you'll die a horrible death.
He screamed hysterically as he was dragged away. I watched coldly, then picked up the microphone. Everyone thought I was about to give a victory speech. I looked at Gianna in the audience. She gave me a small nod. I hereby announce, I said calmly, the dissolution of the Kronos Group. The crowd exploded. President Min, have you lost your mind? All assets will be liquidated to establish the Gianna Foundation, dedicated to supporting technicians disabled by workplace injuries. I removed the CEO badge from my chest and threw it to the floor. This blood-stained crown, and I'm done wearing it. Amid chaos and flashing cameras, I pushed Gianna out of the hall. For the first time, the Soul Night sky looked clean. Do you regret it? She asked. What do you think? I lowered my head and kissed her forehead. I'm broke now. Boss Gianna, still taking apprentices.
She smiled. That depends on your performance. But the next morning, when I woke up, the bedside was empty. Only a note and the repaired pocket watch remain. The watch is fixed, but the debt you owe me isn't paid yet. Don't look for me. Wait until the day I forgive you. She was gone, vanished without a trace. I had fallen from the clouds into the mud, but holding that watch, I laughed. This game had only just begun. 1 year later, the watch shop in Songsidong reopened. The sign was new, the 25th hour. I wore that coarse apron, faded from too many washes, leaning over the counter as I polished tiny parts one by one. Once a rising star in tech, now the neighborhood's famous handsome watch repairman. Too slow. Start over. A strict voice came from behind me. I sighed, put down the tweezers, and turned around. Gianna stood there with a teaching pointer in her hand, inspecting me with a critical eye. Yes, she was back. After disappearing for 3 months, she suddenly showed up at the shop door, one hand supporting her slightly rounded belly, pointing at me and saying, "The kid needs formula." "You're responsible," I cried like an idiot right there. Now she was my master, and I was her only apprentice. Standing as punishment, washing parts, getting scolded for being clumsy, this was my daily routine, and I accepted it gladly. Master, what do you feel like eating tonight?
Why, I asked, trying to please her. Spicy stir-fried rice cakes. Less sugar. Yes, ma'am. Life seemed calm, like a still lake. When news came that Director Pei had taken his own life in prison, we were eating dinner. Gianna's hand paused for a moment. She didn't say anything, just placed a piece of braised pork into my bowl. But I knew the undercurrent had never stopped. Although Pei Junho was still behind bars, his remaining followers kept hovering around the area. The strangest thing of all was the watch called the Silent Traveler. It sat in the most prominent place in the shop, a prized centerpiece. Every night at midnight, when the hour hand reached 12, it didn't jump back to 1. It kept going, to a mark that didn't exist, 13 o'clock, the so-called 25th hour. At first I thought it was a mechanical defect, until one night when I was working late alone in the shop. Tick. The hand crossed 12. The world around me suddenly went quiet.
Ordering outside. Frost in midair. The wind chime hung at an angle, unmoving. Had time stopped? No. I had slipped until a crack in time. Jae-hyung! A familiar voice sounded from the corner. I spun around.
Mushgogi hanged in a lozin or watchain, and on a wind I am pooed and an old pecker mooring. A beekman, a muddy holmouse, ua batori midair.
The wind chime hung at an angle, unmoving. Had I stopped? No. I had slipped until the crack in time. Jae-hyung! A familiar voice sounded from the corner. I spun around. A kind-faced, middle-aged man in an old jacket sat in the chair I usually used, a newspaper in his hands. Dad! The screwdriver fell from my fingers. My father had been dead for 5 years. I had watched him, lowered into the ground with my own eyes.
Don't be afraid, son.
He put down the paper and smiled at me.
We only have 1 hour.
I walked toward him, trembling, trying to touch him. My hand passed straight through his body. A hologram, a hallucination. This watch, my father pointed at the silent traveler on the counter.
It's not an ordinary.
It doesn't record time. It records memories. Under specific magnetic conditions, during this 25th hour, it can replay the past. I was too shocked to speak. Listen carefully, Jae-hyun. His expression suddenly turned serious. The Pei family were just pieces on the board. The real danger comes from that place. What they're looking for is inside Anna's necklace. Which place? Don't trust anyone. Protect Anna. And his image began to flicker. Be careful of your grandfather. Tick. The hour hand jumped back to 1. My father vanished. The rain resumed. The wind chime rang out clearly. I collapsed into the chair, cold sweat soaking my back. Grandfather, the old man from family legends, who supposedly died of illness 20 years ago. Just then the shop door was pushed open. Several men wearing black masks walked in. The one in front played with the lighter, his eyes dark and hostile.
Bossman, up this late.
It was Pei Junho's most loyal lackey, Choi Sik, nicknamed Mad Dog. Get out. I stood up and grabbed a wrench from the table. No need to be so fierce. Choi Sik grinned and lit a cigarette. Heard this place is haunted. Thought we'd come take a look. He flicked the burning cigarette butt toward the wall lined with antique clocks.
They were Gianna's most treasured collection.
Flames leapt up instantly.
Smash it! At his command, the men rushed forward, swinging iron bars. I positioned myself in front of the counter, my gaze turning cold. If you're looking for trouble, then don't blame me for responding. This past year, I haven't only been fixing watches. I've learned how to survive a fight. I've filmed plays. I've starved. I've nagged. The wrench came down hard on Choi Sik's wrist. The sickening crack made my teeth ache. Ah! He screamed, dropping the iron rod. I twisted aside from another attack and drove the pointed pliers I used for watch repair into the man's thigh. He went down with a howl. "Stay away from my shop!" I panted, staring at them like a cornered wolf. But there were too many of them. The fire spread fast. The old wooden structure fed the flames, and thick smoke rolled in, burning our eyes. "Burn him alive!" Choi Sik shouted viciously, clutching his wrist. "Jae-hyun!" Anna's scream came from the second floor. She was still upstairs, asleep. My heart clenched. I stopped fighting, kicked aside the man blocking me, and ran for the stairs. Flames had already swallowed the stairwell. "Don't come down!" I yelled. "Go to the balcony!"
I tore off my apron, soaked it with water, pressed it over my mouth and nose, and charged into the fire. The heat scorched my skin, every inch screaming. When I kicked open the bedroom door, Anna was curled in the corner, clutching a small metal box. Her toolbox. The old tools her father had left her. On the nightstand, the priceless watch, the silent traveler, lay alone, the flames closing in. "Let's go." I scooped her up and wrapped a wet blanket around us both. The watch still there. Where she cried, pointing. "Forget it. I didn't even look at it." Holding her tight, I smashed through the window and jumped from the second floor. Boom! A thunderous crash sounded behind us as the upper floor collapsed. We rolled across the lawn before finally stopping. Watching the shop swallowed by fire, Anna broke down, crying like a child. "Ethel, everything is gone. We're still here." I held her tightly, staring at the flames reaching into the sky. That strange watch, that impossible 25th hour where she could see her father, all of it had turned to ash. Yet my heart was strangely calm. My father had been right. Memories can't be stored, only the present is real. Just then the wail of fire engines cut through the night. Choi Sik and his men were long gone. We sat in front of the ruins until morning. At dawn I sifted through the ashes. By some miracle, the silent traveler hadn't melted. It was blackened and warped like a charred bone. But when I touched, the hands still twitched faintly. Tick tock. "It's not dead," Anna whispered, covering her mouth in shock. I picked it up and saw a crack running along the case. Inside weren't gears. It was a chip, glowing faintly blue. "What is that?" Anna leaned closer, her face draining of color. "A quantum entanglement core. This is military-grade technology." My father's words echoed in my ears. "Be careful of your grandfather. Had this watch never been a timepiece at all, but a vessel for something far bigger? Jae-hyun, look at this." Anna slid a thin strip of foil from beneath the chip. It hadn't burned. Etched into it with microscopic precision or a set of coordinates and a date. The date was 3 days from now. The coordinates pointed to an abandoned sanatorium on the outskirts of Seoul. It was the place where my grandfather had lived before he died. "Do we go?" Anna asked.
I tightened my grip on the blackened watch.
Yes, for the truth. To end all of this, as we prepared to leave, my phone rang. An unknown number. When I answered, an old, raspy voice came through the static. "Did you fix the watch, my good grandson?" My blood froze. That voice! It was my grandfather. The grandfather who had been dead for 20 years.
Who are you? Bring Anna and the necklace. Come see me at the sanatorium."
The line went dead. I looked at Anna. She was lowering her head, gently touching that strange necklace at her throat. So none of it had been coincidence. Every hardship, every turn, had been carefully written. And the one holding the pen was waiting for us in hell. The band sanatorium stood on a barren mountain, like a massive tombstone. Vines crawled over the walls, and the windows looked like hollow eye sockets. Gianna and I pushed open the rusted iron gate. A wave of rot and decay rushed at us. Scared, I asked, taking her hand. "With you here, I am not." She touched her belly. "The baby isn't scared either." We moved down the dim corridor. Following the coordinates, we reached basement level 3. To my surprise, there was still power. The white lights were so bright they made me dizzy. A heavy blast door slowly slid open. Inside was a laboratory that looked straight out of the future. Countless precision instruments were running, and at the very center sat an old man in a wheelchair. Tubes covered his body, sustaining his vital signs. Though his skin was shivered like tree bark, I recognized those hawk-like eyes at once. Min Sin Chen, my grandfather. "So you're really not dead?" I said coldly.
Dead.
The old man let out a wheezing laugh, like a broke. He pressed the button on the armrest. A screen lit up behind him. It displayed countless complex formulas and schematics. The Silent Traveler isn't a watch. It's the key to activating the Eternal Life Project. And the piece of bone inside Anna's necklace is the only stabilizer. His greedy gaze locked onto Anna's chest.
"Give it to me. I can make you rulers of the new world."
"So this is why you killed my father."
"And Anna's father too," I roared. "Sacrifice is necessary,"
he said indifferently.
"They were just stepping stones. You're insane."
Anna cursed under her breath and turned to leave.
"Leave," my grandfather sneered.
Iron bars suddenly dropped from all sides, trapping us in the center.
"Since you're here, don't even think about going. If you won't give it to me, I'll take it myself."
Several modified humans in white protective suits stepped out. Their movements were stiff, but their strength was terrifying. They carried stun batons and surgical knives. "Jihen, be careful." One of them grabbed Gianna by the hair and dragged her toward an operating table. "Let her go!" I rushed forward, but another one punched me and sent me flying. The searing pain of broken ribs hit me again. The surgical blade was about to cut into Gianna's skin.
"Stop! I'll give it to you."
I shouted and pulled the charred pocket watch from my pocket.
"This is what you want, right?"
My grandfather waved his hand, and the modified humans froze.
The watch is just a container. The core is on her.
"No, you're wrong." I raised the watch and hooked my finger into the crack.
The real core was transferred here long ago. It was a performance Gianna and I had planned on the way here.
In truth, nothing had been transferred. I was gambling on his obsession with that watch.
My grandfather's cloudy eyes narrowed. Bring it to me. I walked toward him step by step. When I was only 2 meters away, I suddenly pulled something from my jacket and hurled it at the oxygen tank behind him. It was the electronic hydrate collar Kui Ji had damaged earlier at the shop. I had modified it into a crude electromagnetic pulse bomb. Blue arcs of electricity exploded outward. Every instrument in the lab went dark, sparks flying everywhere. The modified humans, dependent on electronic commands, collapsed instantly.
The life support system on my grandfather's body shut down as well.
You almost Nanya, 'cause I hoped like week downstairs rushed. The door body side its did this tone one of time.
What did you do?
He screamed in terror, pounding the arms of his wheelchair. Sending you where you belong. I rushed over and kicked his wheelchair over. Then I scooped up Gianna and sprinted for the exit. Alert! Self-destruct sequence activated. A mechanical female voice echoed overhead. The entire underground facility began to shake. The ceiling started to collapse. Leave me, I'm pregnant, I can't run fast. Gianna tried to push me away. Shut up! I hoisted her onto my back, gritted my teeth, and ran through the collapsing passage. A massive boulder fell and crushed my lower leg. I dropped to my knees, screaming in pain. Jihan, crawl out. I shoved her toward the exit.
No. If we die together.
She grabbed my collar, tears mixing with dust on her face. At that critical moment, Nan Moshe has praat ad ours mind, terad a mind of mud. The shared pocket watch suddenly burst into a blinding light. Tisia a colliery did not nins with Hifelan collar wave rufu quiet watch. And then Moshe has simmered down. The falling rocks froze in midair, the flames of the explosion stood still. The 25th hour, in that frozen instant, I saw my father. He stood at the exit, waving to us. Using the last of my strength, I carried Gianna and burst through the door. Boom! Behind us, the sanatorium collapsed completely, turning into ruins. The mad old man and his dream of eternal life were buried underground forever. We lay on the grass, gasping for air, watching the rising sun. The pocket watch crumbled entirely into dust and scattered into the wind. Is it over? Gianna asked. Yeah. I looked at my broken leg and smiled. Looks like I really have to depend on you to support me now. She laughed through her tears and planted a hard kiss on me. Idiot! In the hospital, my leg was wrapped in a cast and suspended in the air. Anna was peeling an apple, leaving it full of bumps and gouges. With skills like that, you can fix watches. But you really can't peel apples, I teased. You should be grateful you're getting any, she said, stuffing a big chunk of apple, skin and all, into my mouth. Even though the Pei family had fallen and my grandfather was gone, there was still one knot left untied. The car accident back then. Anna, I asked through a mouthful of apple, my words slurred. What really happened in that crash 5 years ago? Her hand paused. The blade cut through the peel. Actually, she set the knife down and took a yellowed medical record out of her bag. That day I went to find you because I wanted to tell you I was pregnant. But, she took a deep breath, the crash wasn't an accident. Your grandfather had people do it. He didn't want blood he thought was low mixing into the Min family. I felt like I'd been struck by lightning.
All this time I thought it had been an accident, or her desperate attempt to force a marriage. I never imagined the truth would be this cruel. The child didn't make it. My voice shook. She looked at me, her expression complicated. The doctor said it was a miscarriage. I thought so too. Suddenly, she stood up, walked to the door, and opened it. Come in! A small figure cautiously peeked inside. It was a little girl, 4 or 5 years old, with pigtails and big eyes that looked just like Anna's. But between her brows there was a trace of me. This is... My throat felt blocked. Nyan Nyan, Anna said, pulling the little girl in. Say hello. The girl hid behind Anna, sneaking glances at me. Who was he? The little was a mixed skill with Baharigula Mikirkroing. He's that silly uncle who can't even fix a watch properly, Anna said, smiling through tears. No, I said. I'm your dad. I reached out, tears pouring down. Nyan Nyan, I'm your dad. So heaven hadn't taken away all its gifts. The child I thought I'd lost had been secretly brought into the world by Anna and entrusted to relatives overseas. It was her greatest revenge against me, and also her greatest forgiveness. The little girl hesitated, then slowly walked to the bedside. She reached out her chubby hand and touched my cast. Does it hurt? It doesn't, I said, crying and smiling at the same time. Not at all. She pulled something out of her pocket and placed it in my hand. It was a plastic toy watch. Mom said you like watches. This is for you. It doesn't work, but it's very pretty. I held that cheap plastic watch and cried like a child. It was worth 10,000 times more than the Silent Traveler, more than the entire Kronos group. Anna walked over and wrapped her arms around the two of us. Sunlight spilled into the hospital room, warm and bright. In that moment, I finally understood. Time doesn't need to be repaired. Because it was never lost. It was only waiting for us to find our way home. 3 years later. Song Si-dong. The new watch shop was finished, bigger and brighter than before. The name was still the 25th hour. But we no longer took expensive luxury orders. A sign hung by the door. Only watches with stories repaired. Gianna and I wore matching aprons, seated at the workbench. Nian lay at a small table nearby, drawing. Boss, this watch was left by my grandfather. It's not worth much, but... A young man held out a rusty old Shanghai watch, a little nervous. Fix it, I said, taking the watch and slipping on my lupe. As long as it's real, I can make it tick again. Gianna brewed coffee beside me, the aroma filling the shop. My leg still had a slight limp, but it didn't stop me from walking. The bone gear that had once been hidden in that necklace had been removed and laid to rest at her father's grave. The scar on Gianna's chest was still there, but I told her it was the most beautiful tattoo in the world. Min Ji-hyung, look at this. Gianna suddenly called to me. In her hands was the obsidian box that once held the Silent Traveler. Inside, there had only been a pile of powder. But now, under the sunlight, the powder was slowly drawing together. As if alive, it reassembled into a tiny gear. It wasn't metal, and it wasn't bone. It was clear and luminous, like a diamond, like a tear. This is a crystallization of time, she said softly. We looked at each other and smiled. Maybe that watch truly had a soul. It had witnessed betrayal, hatred, and death.
and also sacrifice, redemption, and love. In the end, it turned itself into a seed. Let's plant it, I said. We went to the backyard and dug a hole beneath the old locust tree. We buried the shining gear. No headstone, no ceremony, just letting it return to the earth. Dad, would it grow into a watch? Nian asked curiously. No, I rubbed her head. It will grow into time. The sun set, golden light spilling across the yard. The wind chimes rang. Hundreds of clocks in the shop struck the hour at once. Dong dong dong.